I would now move on to our next speaker. We have Dr. Deepti here, Dr. Deepti Navratna. She is the Executive Director of IGNCA Soundzone. She's a neuroscientist from Harvard University and a Carnatic vocalist. She has set up a Raga lab at IGNCA recently. In her work, she works with artists from all over India and has documented and archived many valuable traditions which are under threat of vanishing. She is the founder of the Carnatic Alchemy Project, an international collaborative venture which brings together artists from all over the world. Welcome, Dr. Deepti. Very happy to have you here. And first, I would like to know, how is your daughter, please?
Oh, she's doing great. I managed to
Thank
get
God
back
for
in time, thanks to the lack of traffic on the streets of Bangalore.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Thank God
nostalgia.
for
This
that.
is the Bangalore we grew up in, and ironically, the lockdown has taken us there.
Yes, yes, please. Thank you.
All right. So, greetings to all, and I guess I'm the last man standing between a fabulous set of participants who are out to speak next. I'd like to sort of share my views and perspectives on this beautiful marriage between arts and education. And I'd like to pluck that word of marriage from Prakash ji in his fascinating talk that we just witnessed. So clearly the marriage between arts and education is promising, but it's also challenging because the scientific delivery or a methodical or a structured delivery of arts in education, or arts as education itself, or education within the arts needs three prerogatives to emerge. The first prerogative is specificity. Like in a drug delivery or a drug deployment mode in the pharmaceutical industry, any drug that enters the market, any healing device that enters the market, basically has to have a mechanism of action. That basically, if you're looking to deploy music as either therapy or as a device that's able to enhance children, adults, or enthusiastic older adults towards educational goals, then there must be a greater degree of specificity of action. So we must link musical pedagogical devices or musical acts or musical performance to specific cognitive outcomes. So we're all here because we believe in the power of arts and education. Arts, with their powerful communicative abilities, their abilities to communicate facets of the self in ways that, like I think Beethoven said that music succeeds where words fail. So we all know that. But when we are actually trying to deploy music or arts, not just for performative ends and not just for aesthetic ends, but for educational outcomes or for clinical ends, as in music therapy or arts therapy, we need to actually look at specificity, like I said, and reproducibility. There's a great amount of individual variation. If you take a class of 20 children, they have multiple learning abilities. The way they learn is different. Howard Gardner proposed this theory of multiple intelligences. So every child in the classroom presents an innovative educational challenge for the music educator or the arts educator who is here armed with the tools and skills of her own artistic experiences. The third thing is deployability. When you're looking at a country like India with its regional and geographical difficulties, you have to be able to assimilate the local with the global. You'll have to think glocal, since that's the latest buzzword in town. And deployability, and that begs the question, who needs to deploy it and who needs to regulate this deployment? And often the government is always thought of as a body, as a single stakeholder body that needs to be actually regulating, also being clearinghouse for ideologies, methodologies, and it being the major think tank in question. However, we should perhaps move towards a more inclusive model where multiple stakeholders are put together to come up with a national curriculum. I don't think India has a cultural policy for that matter. And then the national education policy has just now, I think, woken up to the idea of including arts as critical determinants in educational success. So having said that, I would sort of, in this marriage between arts and education, neuroscience is a nice segue to actually bring in a certain frame of objectivity to this. I'm not saying that neuroscience is the be all and end all, and it's perhaps the only way to bridge the problem of arts and education, but it is a way in which we can do that. And when we look at using neuroscience as a segue between arts and education, we need to be aware of who, what, when, the context, and the subject in question. So when we talk about arts and education, there are, when we talk about education itself, we were in barely 2 decades ago, education was bothered about the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? We were a rote memory heavy educational system. And now with the advent of exponential technologies, we have finally woken up that the human brain and the human cognition is capable of more, and that we must be able to train our children to do better things with their brains than to just be able to reproduce things from memory. So now education is all about the 3 C's: communication, creativity, and cognitive development. So this framework of the 3 C's that we already have emerging in the educational paradigms could be used as intellectual frameworks to bring in arts. So conventionally also, there are 3 ways in which arts and education has interacted. The first way it has done in the past is to place arts as a skill manufacturing machine in an already established curriculum. So this was what led to the, co-curricular, extracurricular activity and the curricular activity. So because there was this very synthetic placement of the arts as a performative and a product of a culture in an already existing curriculum. So the issue with that was that there is no real hardcore data that there is skill development. Well, so many times, I'm not saying, I'm not overgeneralizing when I say that often, even the theories of situated cognition say that often learning to play the violin is just learning to play the violin. There may be actually no transfer of skill from learning to play a violin to being good at math. Or certainly there may be underlying cognitive transfer of abilities. The person who's able to sit and learn something for 40 minutes in trying to learn a violin may also be able to sit for 40 minutes with unbridled attention in trying to solve a math problem. So we are looking at underlying cognitive developments of working memory, executive control. So there are sort of byproducts of this training that maybe affecting these effects. However, there is a lack of data on it. There's a lack of data, hardcore data, that pushes the case forward for placing arts in a standardized educational curriculum. For example, what should you place? Should you place classical music? In many communities and many regions of the country, actually a good number of regions in the country, the classical music aesthetic is wasted. It is neither socially desirable nor intellectually palatable, to be straight about it. So in such a scenario, why are you placing Indian classical music in that curriculum unless you know what cognitive outcome is actually coming out of it? Do you teach them sargams? If you teach them sargams, what cognitive development are you actually giving to the students? So a certain amount of awareness is required. Secondly, in trying to harness pedagogical methods that are already existing in Indian classical music and trying to bring them into the educational system, that is another approach which may have better success in the Indian paradigm, where there is a cross-pollination of ideas on how to teach, who to teach, when to teach, and what is teaching, and how people learn, and so on. The third approach has been using arts as a medium. So like Saskia just mentioned, using Shakespeare to teach math, and using shloka to actually help children memorize large quantities of information as mnemonic devices, and so on. So these have been the 3 major approaches in which by which arts and education have talked to each other. And to sort of summarize the issues in the field, so that I throw this open for discussion and question and answers later. The major issues, like Prakashji mentioned, is qualification. Like, does this art form or does this artistic pedagogy actually qualify in the realm of qualify as a instructive device in the clinic or in an educational space? There's actually no criteria that anybody has evaluated, has put forward to see if something actually qualifies to be in a classroom. Second is that of quantification. Like I said, India has very few longitudinal studies on the success of arts in education paradigms. And there are people doing phenomenal amounts of work like Saskia and Anil Srinivasan in Madras. And that data needs to be compared. There needs to be a big data analysis of this someday, somewhere. And third thing is that we don't have any methodologies. In the West, if you see, there's a Kodali method. Saskia also sort of referred to that. There's not a vocabulary of established methodologies which are tethered to three things: how to triangulate the arts to the context of the delivery, how to triangulate the artistic method to the subject in question. So that brings in the neuroscience, the early childhood development, and the usage of technology and the feasibility of deployment. So as you can see, this is a hard task. It's actually a multivariate problem which needs to involve multiple stakeholders at the level of policy making in India today. And research in arts education is almost very dull in India, and that needs funding. Actually, arts education is a big gap in governmental and private funding. There are very few agencies willing to fund research which says, I want to see if playing singing sargams in trikalas actually has an impact on working memory of students. How many grants? There's no DST funding for this exact research orientation. So I'd like to leave this this talk with more questions, because that's what we should do as scientists, because the maturity of a field is actually dictated by the maturity of the questions we ask and not by the lucidity of the answers we may have at the moment. So these are some of the issues of the field and the promises thereon. So I look forward to
so much.
Yes.
You've really given us food for thought. Yes, there is lack of data. We are going to have struggle in even implementing the new education policy also.
Right.
In fact, there are quite a few elements in there where it gives complete flexibility to the institution. So if we have 950 universities in India, these 950 universities are going to be classified into two. Universities that primarily focus on education, and universities that will primarily focus on research. And students are going to be given pre-entry and exit with the teaching learning outcomes defined by the university itself. So I can, for example, define, for example, if a student is in his bachelor's, I can define after 1 year that, okay, you can quit and you get a diploma. And then he quits, he comes back to me to get an additional diploma for the second year. For the third year, a bachelor's, and the fourth year, almost like a PhD research. So a lot of flexibility will be given to the institutions, and while we await the policy to be implemented, we really don't know, because of the kind of scale that we all have. The scale itself is so frightening that it's going to be tough implementation. But we see some light at the end of the tunnel about maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we should settle down, as they are going to start at the kindergarten level. And they have identified the failing, the whole reason why the Indian education system today fails is because of the failing primary education system. So therefore, they're going to concentrate a lot on the children first, and they have a huge, they have some drastic measures that they've taken in terms of the checkpoints, where a student completes his 10th, 12th, enters his graduation, and then post-graduation. So we await for that. And in the meanwhile, I think scholars such as you and think tanks such as CSP and others have to come together to help them build a curriculum that revolves around the art that we are speaking about right now. So thank you very much for your feedback for
Thank
today.
you.
It was
Thank you for
excellent
putting us all
engaging.
together in that direction.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Now we